screen with you, then we'll have, as usual, a quick recap of yesterday's lecture, and then we will introduce new material. Okay, at this point, I want to ask you guys whether you see my screen. Do you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's rapidly go through yesterday's lecture. So yesterday, that was 15 December, we we had last week introduced embeddings and quotients perhaps. Anyway, so we started talking of embeddings and quotients, and we said let's look at them in the category of sets, simpler than topological spaces, just sets. So we said in sets, take an injective map, and then it has this universal property that given any other map whose image is contained in the image of this, then it uniquely factors through X. Because where can I send Z? Well, Z is going to GZ, and GZ has to be of the type Fx because image of G is contained in image of F. And X is unique because this map is injective. Therefore, only thing I can do is send Z to X, and so this thing comes. I don't have any choice. My hand is forced. So in topological spaces, this was exactly that property. If I had a continuous injection and I had another continuous map whose image is contained in that, I wanted to know whether I can factor it such that this map is continuous. Of course, there is a map because after all these are sets. So there is a map H defined by this same formula. Only question is H continuous? What will make H continuous? Inverse image of every open set here has to be open set. Now, what are open sets here? They are exactly inverse images of open sets here because that is the definition of embedding. Embedding says that the open sets in X are exactly of the form F inverse of an open set here. And therefore, the inverse image of this inverse image is directly the inverse image, which is open because G is continuous. So, embeddings in topological spaces had this same property provided you gave the right topology on X, and only then we call it an embedding in topological spaces. So injective plus an extra condition. So this was it, but is it continuous? And then we gave some example, blah, blah, blah. And then we said the condition is this. Then I said simplest example is this. Ishan, are you listening? Ishan wanted to know in what sense it is simplest. Okay, I'll address this question actually. Simplest or whatever. Okay. Then I gave you examples of various embeddings. So here's a circle, here's a plane, and all possible embeddings of circle in the plane are these examples. They are examples of what are called as simple closed flows. That is what is a simple closed flow. Or maybe the image of this is called simple closed flow. Okay. Now somehow there seems to be a digression or example of categorical argument. Here was an example of categorical argument. I told you to argue categorically, then the same argument gives you a proof in different categories. Okay. Where what is needed for that argument should exist in those categories. This argument is using existence of binary product. So whatever category is binary product, this argument is going to do. So after talking of embeddings, we started talking of quotient morphisms, and we said among sets, a quotient morphism is a surjection. And what universal property does it enjoy? It enjoys a certain universal property written in this box here, which I will talk about later. But right now, just let's say that if G is any map such that whenever f of x1 is equal to f of x2, then G of x1 should be G of x2. If that happens, then there exists a unique such map. Because what option do I have? Very simple. So if I take any small z here, then there is some x1 which goes to this small z, and this x1 is going to some g x1. So send z there. Question, does this depend on the choice of x1? If I had some x2 which also went to the same z, what will happen? So x1 and x2 went to the same z. Our condition is on this map G is that whenever 2 points go to the same point here, they go to the same point here. So G of x1 is G of x2, and therefore Z going to G of x1 is well defined. And I have no other choice to send Z2. So there exists a unique such map. So surjective maps in sets have this universal property that makes them quotients in sets. In groups, the same property holds. If I have group G and a surjective homomorphism, excuse me. Yeah. So in groups, if I have a group G, a group H, and a surjective homomorphism, and if I have another group K and a map G, and now the property that any 2 points which go to the same point here also go to the same point here can more simply be stated that if something is in the kernel of this map, then it should also be in the kernel of this map. Once that happens, there exists a unique group homomorphism from H to here. So then we talk of quotient maps in topology. So what is a quotient map in topology? X to Y should be a continuous surjection with the property, extra property, that all those sets whose inverse image here is open should be open in Y. Okay. So unless you put that condition, this factoring map will not be continuous. There exists a set theoretic factoring map because after all these are sets, and if it's surjective, and the property is also the property required of set quotients for a surjection. But by putting the quotient topology on Y, which means take any set whose inverse image is open here, you declare it to be open in Y. By putting this topology, this map H becomes continuous. So there is a unique continuous map like this. So I should define my topology on Y so that open sets in Y are exactly all subsets A of Y, so that F inverse A is open in X. So if somebody had some other topology here which also did the job, then there would exist a unique map from here to here, and there exists a unique map from here to here. Yeah. And both are continuous. So every open set here is open set here. And this is the same set. So the topologies are actually one and the same. And the map has to be identity for this to come here. So the identity map, yeah, which is why they are the same topologies. Then we said we will construct quotients for equivalence relations. Quotient for an equivalence relation. So you take a set X and you take an equivalence relation on X. One way such an equivalence relation will arise is when X to Y is a surjection F. Given a surjection F, I associate to it this equivalence relation. And it is indeed an equivalence relation. I can see a detailed checking of that being done here. This is called detailed checking. Now, these are called equivalence classes. All things which are equivalent to a common thing. Those are exactly the fibers. The equivalence classes for the equivalence relation induced by F are the fibers of F. And X is partitioned into the fibers. You see the fibers are disjoint. For two different points, the inverse images are two different. They don't intersect. Similarly, if I have a group and a surjection of groups, I get an equivalence relation on G, and that equivalence relation is you take the kernel and take the cosets of the kernel. And that's the equivalence relation. So given an equivalence relation, I can always make a quotient. Okay. And conversely, every quotient comes from an equivalence relation. In what about topoical spaces? In topoical spaces, suppose if I begin with an equivalence relation, then I can make the set of quotients and give it the quotient topology. Conversely, if I have surjective map and if Y has the quotient topology, then Y will be homeomorphic to this quotient set with the quotient topology. So I'll write this as a simple exercise. Well, it's a trivial exercise that we already solved it, but again to underline that fact. Okay. Let's change the color. If x to y f is a surjection of sets, then there is a then the okay then take to be the resulting equivalence under which x1 is equivalent to x2 is means f x1 equal to f x2 and take the quotient. Okay. Then there exists a unique bijection H from Y to such that, okay, this is the quotient. So whichever way you want to put the arrow on H, I think I put the arrow this way. So let me wipe out this part. Okay. Such that what? Q is equal to H composite F. Okay. So in that sense, this is the simplest surjection. Simplest surjections are quotients by cancellations. Okay. Every surjection is really this in disguise. Up to a unique bijection, every surjection is a quotient. Conversely, if I begin with a quotient, it has this property, so it's a surjection. Same thing. Same property I can repeat in every category that we are considering. If G to H, F is a surjection, surjective group homomorphism, then let n be equal to kernel of f, let G, which is a normal subgroup. This is normal. And you have quotient homomorphism. G mod n, this is the quotient homomorphism, which sends G to Gn. Okay, now time to say the universal property. Then there exists unique H. There exists unique group homomorphism, group isomorphism H from H to G mod n. Oh, you are better off saying it this way. I don't mind whichever way you want to say. If there's unique isomorphism this way, unique isomorphism it's inverse, such that Q equal to HOF. Now let's change our category and go to topological spaces. Yet another category. If X, F, Y is a continuous surjection of topological spaces and Y has the quotient topology, okay, and Now also consider X mod Q. Okay. Let be the equivalence on X defined by X1 is equivalent to X2 is equivalent to Fx1 equal to Fx2. By the way, this is that same equivalence relation even on groups. We can write it in short form using the kernel because using the multiplicative property in groups. Instead of saying two things have the same image, we have to say that first thing times second thing inverse has image identity, which means first thing times second thing inverse is in the kernel, which means first and second thing are in the same coset of the kernel. Left, right, doesn't matter, it's a normal. Okay. And let be given the quotient topology. Okay, now time for the same universal property. Then there exists unique H. There exists a unique continuous bijection bicontinuous. So now this is called a homeomorphism. Now there exists a unique name is homeomorphism. H from Y to such that Q is equal to H composite F. Or I could have chosen H inverse here and written always that F equal to. So let's do that. It's better that our standard things become the source instead of target. Okay. After all, it's a homeomorphism, so I can choose my direction. And let's put that H always on this side. Okay. Such that F is equal to, not F equal to. Now, which way is the composite? H composite F. No, I want to write F equal to, therefore, let me write so that F is equal to H times Q. Here again write F equal to H times Q. And here I'll write F equal to H times Q. So you see, so Ishan, are you listening? In this sense, Q, Q, Q are the simplest. Here Q simplest hai, because everything is essentially this up to a unique isomorphism, bijection, homeomorphism, whatever you have. So you see, this categorical statement is the same in all three categories. The technology that went in under the bonnet was how to make quotient group, normal subgroup, blah, 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 how to make quotient topology, blah, open sets, continuity, blah, blah, blah.
Yes,
But,
sir. Thank you. Um, I will say something at the end, just to follow up on this, but I do
all
not
right,
want to
all right, all right, good. Yeah, so you see the under the bonnet, the engines may be different. One may be petrol, one may be diesel, one may be electric, but the same steering wheel, the same accelerator, the same clutch, the same brake, and you can drive one, you can drive the other one. And so you have to make arguments using such properties and not go back again to how is a normal subgroup defined. Just take off from here. And the arguments that you will make will hold in all different categories. This is I think I am again and again underlining for you how working with categorical abstraction is very useful, and time, it saves a lot of time and helps you transfer your wisdom from one area into another. Okay. There's somebody about whom I'll tell you later. Okay, now let's get back to business. So I want to today again go back to the study of embeddings and quotients in the category top, the category of topological spaces. So I want to know what if some important properties are inherited by embeddings and quotients. So question 1. Let X be Hausdorff. Let f of y to x be an embedding. Is y Hausdorff? Second, let x f z be a quotient. And I have to say let x be Hausdorff. And let x be Hausdorff. Is z Hausdorff? So I have these two questions. Okay. Now, you may be tempted to think that, oh, there is something called Hausdorff. What does Hausdorff mean? Somebody tell me. Yeah, what's Hausdorff?
One is the diagonal is closed. The
Wonderful.
product.
That is Ishan talking.
Yes, sir.
You are totally indoctrinated, I can see. Okay, very good. That's the good answer. But somebody might have thought, oh, I should take a point in Y, I should take another point in Y and try to produce disjoint open neighborhoods. And such an argument is not impossible. After all, pictorially, it may look very good. So you may say that this is X, and inside that, this is Y, and now I take 2 points. Now these 2 points, P and Q, with P not equal to Q, and these are in Y. They are also in X, because I have this map F to X. Okay, Y is sitting inside X via the map F. Then I have some open neighborhoods in X, which separate them. So Fp belongs to U, Fq belongs to V, U intersection V equal to empty set. And these are open in X. Which means F inverse P belongs, sorry, what F inverse? P belongs to this means P belongs to F inverse U, Q belongs to F inverse V, and these two are disjoint. And F inverse of U intersection F inverse V, which is the same as F inverse of U intersection V, is F inverse of empty set, is the empty set. So therefore Hausdorff, therefore Y is Hausdorff. Why are these open? Why is this open? Somebody tell me.
F is continuous.
Because F is continuous, so inverse image of open set is open. So we gave some long proof which required producing 2 points, 2 open sets. their intersection, inverse image, whatnot. Now let's argue categorically. So I have x cross x, and inside that the diagonal of x, this is closed. Now I have mapped from y to x, that is f. So by yesterday's categorical argument, I have mapped from y cross y, continuous map, f cross f, to x cross x. Nowhere did I have to think of points and neighborhoods and nothing. I have this map. Now here, inside here is the diagonal. What's the inverse image of this diagonal? Inverse image of the diagonal of x is going to be the diagonal of y. Why? Because f is injective. So if I have two different points whose image is the same point, then those 2 points have to be the same point because it is injective. So the diagonal y is the inverse image of diagonal x under f cross f going from y cross y to x cross x. And we are given that x is closed. And this map is continuous, the continuous map. That was yesterday's categorical argument. Again, it didn't use any points, nothing. This was the argument which was common to sets, groups, whatever. Therefore, delta y is closed in y cross y. Therefore, y is Hausdorff. So I want you to look at these two arguments. Both the arguments showed that if x is Hausdorff and this is an embedding, then y is Hausdorff. And one argument exactly did all this. Okay. And in this argument, did we even use that f is an embedding? No, we didn't even use that. We just showed that if this is a continuous map, injective continuous map, then that is enough. So the proof shows that if f from y to x is injective continuous, and if x is Hausdorff, then y is Hausdorff. Okay. So Hausdorffness is inherited by subspaces. So I can summarize this answer in this slogan: Hausdorffness is inherited by topological subspaces. Are all properties of an object inherited by its sub-objects? Okay, let's look at groups. Suppose I have a group and I have subgroup, and you know that the group is abelian. Is the subgroup abelian? Okay, everybody answer in a chorus. This is designed to test my microphone, internet, whatever.
Yes, sir.
Follow. Who is answering? If Ishan is answering, this proves that Ishan's internet is also working, but that I already know. Do I have only one working audience? Everybody else's internet down. Okay. So, or how about this? If I have a group which is cyclic, then every subgroup is cyclic, right?
Yes,
So,
sir.
yes. So cyclicity is inherited. Some traits are inheritable. So it's like some diseases. If the parent has ... disease, then the child gets that disease or whatever. Or it may simply be very large height. Parent is very tall, child is likely to be very tall. So those are called inherited properties. So this is what we have here. Instead of parent and child, here we are talking of topological space and subspace, or group and subgroup. Okay. Now let's come to the second question. So we answered this question. Now questions. Okay. So we might as well choose this quotient, because we showed that every quotient is up to a unique homeomorphism, this quotient. By the way, you know every equivalence relation has a graph, right? This graph So what does the graph consist of? The graph is the set of all x1, x2, is that x1 is equivalent to x2. So every equivalence relation has a graph. And from this graph, you read off the equivalence relation. If I take now the projection, so if I take x cross x, and if I take the projection P1, x, and I take R and take this composite map, okay? Take this composite map, F. What are the fibers of F? Somebody tell me. What are the fibers of this map F? This is the inclusion map. Yeah, can you hear me? Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
What are the fibers of F? Bolo, loudly answer. This is a set theory question, guys.
Sir, you are asking F inverse of X for some X.
Yeah, any X. What will it be? Take some small x. What is F inverse of X?
Yeah, so it will be X comma Y for all Y which are X, B are the
So that's the equivalence class of X, right? The fibers are the equivalence
yes,
class.
sir, yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Fibers are exactly the equivalence classes of this map. समझ गया ना? That is how you see the graph. Because all those lying above X, meaning all those X2, which are equivalent to X1. So that's the graph. So, sorry, that's the fiber. That's exactly the equivalence class. So you will say that F inverse of X is equal to X cross its equivalence class, where this is the set of all Y such that X is equivalent to Y. This is the equivalence class determined by X. So are you used to writing it like this? Is there some standard notation for equivalence class? Perhaps this one looks better. Instead of this pointy one, let's change it to the square one. This is a better notation, where this square bracket X is the equivalence class of X. So F inverse of any small x is the equivalence class of X labeled by this X. Okay. If this is how X cross X looks, the equivalence class certainly has a diagonal inside it and then has some other stuff around it. And as you know, that other stuff has to look symmetric. And then the fiber are the equivalence class. Here to here is the equivalence class of this. Okay. All right. So I have this quotient. Now this is a quotient in topology. This is a topological space. This is given the quotient topology, which means all those subsets are open whose inverse image is open. Inverse image under Q are saturated open sets. The inverse image of any point is a fiber. So inverse image of any set is a union of fibers, union of equivalence classes, which means it's saturated under the equivalence relation. Somebody liked this word saturated. So is she paying attention? Okay. So inverse images are saturated. So any set whose inverse image is open is declared to be open. That is the quotient topology. Then this is a continuous map. Now I want to know. Let X be Hausdorff. Is Hausdorff question clear? I am asking whether quotient inherits the Hausdorff property. Let's compare with groups. Suppose a group is abelian. Is its quotient abelian?
Yes, sir.
Yes, always. Okay. Some properties are inherited, some properties are not inherited. Suppose a group is infinite. Is the quotient also infinite?
No, sir.
No, because after all, Z has Z. The trivial subgroup, sorry, the trivial group is a quotient of every group, and obviously it's not infinite. Or the infinite cyclic group Z has all finite cyclic groups as its quotients. They are not infinite, and so on, so on. So some properties are inherited, some are not. So we are asking whether in topology Hausdorffness is inherited by the quotient. So now what will you do? Tell me. Enlightened approach, point by point approach, whatever. So let's take the enlightened approach. Now it's time that enlightened approach becomes your default approach. So I have the following question, therefore. I am going to translate this question into the enlightened translation is going to be, here's the enlightened translation. Is the diagonal closed in okay. So let's investigate this point. You see? So I have X cross X and I have the map Q cross Q to X mod cross. And you can check, this is again a quotient. Very fine. Okay. Now, inside here is the diagonal. I want to know what's the inverse image of this. That's going to be here. What is this? What is this? If this was the diagonal of X cross X, then you know inverse image of this is the diagonal. Diagonal is closed, therefore inverse image of this is closed, and because this has the quotient topology, therefore this must be closed, and we are through. So what is it? This is I am simply asking now you a set theoretic question. What is this set?
So this is set X, Y, where X is related to Y.
Yeah, so what is that set? Do you see that set on our blackboard anywhere? Look at the blackboard. Do you see that set anywhere?
Sir, may I ask something, please?
There it is. That's the graph. Okay. This is that set. Set of all X and Y which are related to each other, and that is called the graph. Graph of equivalence relation. Okay. That was the graph. That was the graph which we projected on X, and the fibers were the equivalence classes. So all the last 5 minutes we were talking about that subset. So now it has to strike a bell. When asked to what set it is, we were talking about that set all the time. So this is just R. So the question becomes, so we know that X is Hausdorff. Equivalent to saying that R is closed in X cross X. So both kind of examples are possible. This means both kind of examples are possible. So you can give examples where R is closed. Also, you can give an example where it is not closed. So now I want examples of an equivalence relation whose graph is closed and whose graph is not closed. So graph is closed, very easy. Just take the trivial equivalence relation. What's the graph of the trivial equivalence relation? By trivial equivalence relation, I mean the identity equivalence relation. Everything is only equivalent to itself, equality. So if this is equality, then what is R? Bolo.
X comma X.
Yeah, what is it called?
The
You are still
diagonal of
down to points. Don't go down to points. We have these nice objects now. Okay, this is the diagonal. So equivalence relation is identity, means the graph is the diagonal. Diagonal is equality. Okay. So this is closed. This is closed if X is Hausdorff. But now give me an example. Give an example where X is Hausdorff, but R is not closed. Sure. So I want a not closed subset of X cross X, which is what? Which satisfies those three properties. Diagonal is there, and it's symmetric, and it's transitive. What diagonal is there has some name, no? What is that name? What? Reflexive. Reflexive is the name. So give me a subset R of X cross X, which is reflexive, transitive, symmetric, but not closed. Yeah, somebody ready to give an example? Very, very simple. Your space is Hausdorff after all, so don't worry. I'm only asking for a subset which is not closed, not difficult. Easy to visualize. Okay, so here's an example. I take X to be equal to, let's say, the real line. Or I take X to be 0, 1. Easier to imagine. Okay. Now I am going to write X cross X. X cross X looks like this. This is how X cross X looks. This is X cross X. Now inside that I am going to give my equivalence relation in the color. The equivalence relation R is going to sit inside here. So first of all, let me put in the diagonal, because there I have no option. I have to put in the diagonal in my equivalence relation, right? Now I will put in something more. I will put in this dotted. I have put in this dotted thing. Okay, you understood what is my equivalence relation now? Can somebody write a formula for this equivalence relation? The formula would be x is equivalent to x. Firstly, second, now what is this? This point may be what, 1/4, and this point may be 3/4. So let me say that second point is that if x and y belong to 1/4 to 3/4, then x is equivalent to y. Okay, and that's it. I think I have described this. So is it clear what's the equivalence relation I want to say? Any number in the interval 0, 1 is equivalent to itself. Yes, that I'm forced to say. But any number between 1/4 and 3/4 is also equivalent to any other number between 1/4 and 3/4. And that makes that graph this color. This. Is it an equivalence relation? Can you check? Is it obvious? Everybody check. You have your paper and pencil with you, as you listen to the lecture. Check. Check that this is an equivalence relation. And this is not closed. This is not closed. Why? Because look at this dotted border here. You can come to it from the right hand side, but this is a limit point from here, but it's not in this set. So it's not closed. So let's look at this point. This point here would be 1/4 and 7/2. The point, so this is the interval. Now I'm worried that an interval seems to have the same notation as a pair of points. That's too bad. The point P with x equal to 1/4. So now I'm devising some method to indicate a point instead of an interval. Is in the closure of R, but not in R. So is it clear to you? I have given you an equivalence relation which is not closed, and the quotient is not Hausdorff, you see. What's a clear indication of a quotient not being Hausdorff? It's when a sequence has two limit points. Okay. A sequence can have two limit points. Same sequence can have two limit points. Because you see, let's draw one sequence. Where is this sequence tending to? This point. But this sequence is also tending to this point. Because after all, that whole dotted square has been collapsed to a single point. So this sequence you may think converges here, but it also converges here, it also converges here, it also converges here. Because all these dotted ones are in the limit of this. Yeah. Okay. So I am leaving the pictorial verification to you, but I have already given you an example. Because I have given an equivalence relation, you only have to check that this is an equivalence relation. Don't worry about this sequence and the argument made with sequences. I have given you an equivalence relation which is not closed, and therefore the quotient is not Hausdorff, because we proved here that quotient is Hausdorff and only if the equivalence relation is closed. Here's an equivalence relation not closed, therefore the quotient is not Hausdorff. Now you produce your favorite sequence which has two limit points. I leave that to you. So is it clear to you, this whole argument? Let's summarize it into saying that. So we have proved the following theorem. Let X be a topological space and let R be an equivalence relation on X. Then X mod R, well, X mod. See, now I'm going to use the same notation for the graph and the equivalence. There's no point having all kinds of different notations. E is Hausdorff if and only if R contained in X cross X is closed. Okay. Example. Let R be the diagonal. Then X, what is the quotient by the identity cancellation? Is X, which is Hausdorff if and only if so by thinking in terms of diagonal and pullback of the diagonal and whatnot, we have generalized the whole notion of Hausdorffness. What is Hausdorffness for X is just a special case of Hausdorffness for any quotient of X, and that requires only the graph to be closed. In particular, when is X Hausdorff? When the graph of the identity, the equality relation is closed, which means diagonal is closed. Okay. So at this point, any questions? Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. I had one question.
Great.
And the question was that as you have defined the property for categorical spaces above, saying that if there is a map phi from G, G is a group, for example, this you have defined. So you mean to say that this situation will be true in all categorical spaces. For example, I can see that this will be true in vector spaces or categorical vectors. Yes, this, yes.
Yes, it's true in all. Yes, in vector spaces also this is true, as you can see.
Yes. So in general, in all categories, this will hold.
No, because the requisite construction of quotient may not exist in all categories. You see, you have to do the hard work of constructing a quotient in your individual category. There is no shortcut for that because not all categories admit quotients. You see.
So can I find any example of it through net or somewhere?
Plenty. Where you don't have quotients, there are plenty of examples. As you study more mathematics, you will see them. Or ask me after the lecture is over. See, it involves categories which you have not encountered. Usually, the categories which are chosen for undergraduate study are those where all kinds of nice things hold, which is why those categories are nice and really they are important. But the more and more complicated things, the things are not there. Have you heard of manifolds, for example?
Yes, sir, but I have not studied.
You have no idea, no? But manifolds don't have quotients necessarily. Quotient is a very delicate question for manifolds. So, you know, even in an advanced MSc course, there may be manifolds. Yeah. So you are now not very far from learning examples where such constructions are highly difficult and may not work. Constructions like quotient. Okay. Now, let's come to, in fact, let me also say that quotient is one of the most difficult and important things in mathematics. Do you remember your primary school order of learning operations? You first learn addition, then subtraction, then multiplication, and then division. Am I right?
Yes.
And division is quotients, right?
Yes.
And that was the most difficult. Remember, even then, quotients was the most difficult stuff. Okay? And how was quotient said? You had 12 apples and you make groups of 3 apples each. How many groups do you get of 3 apples? 4. So you are making equivalence classes. You are taking a basket and putting 3 apples in it. Then you are taking one more basket and putting 3 more apples in it, and so on till all apples get over. And then you have 4 baskets, right? So you had the quotient. Fine. And that was really an equivalence relation and quotient. Now already problem came. Suppose you had 13 apples and you had 4 boxes. Now quotient was not possible. So you had to expand your number system so that quotient became possible. You went to rational numbers so that quotient is possible. Quotient was not possible in your earlier number system. So this is the kind of thing which happens in all interesting categories. You demand a quotient and the quotient may not be there, and then you may want to increase your category so that quotients are there, and so on. This is the game which is played with more and more associated categories and is very much an active area of mathematical investigation, construction of quotients. All right, that was a good question. Any other question? That question came out of the countdown. So let me resume the countdown. See, you may ask a question and the others may also have the same question in mind. So you are doing everybody a service, or my answer may tell you something extra and that you may find interesting. So again, that is something service you are doing for everybody. So resuming the countdown, we had come down to 6. So 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Boom, boom. Rocket is launched. So you have no further questions. So all of you have digested. Well, okay, I'm joking. All of you have at least registered all that I have said today. Let us quickly recapitulate today's lecture because I don't have time to begin on new things. So let's look at today's talk. Wow, where did today's talk begin? I have not made a mark saying here is today's talk. Okay, so I should have made it here. Let me put it here. Oh, I didn't go here. This is lecture number 10, right? I think lecture 10. And now it is flashing. I don't know how to solve this. Okay, so perhaps I should cut and paste. No. All right. So we began by talking about a surjection of sets, and it had this universal property. And really, such a surjection was up to a unique bijection, just the quotient of x by the equivalence relation. The equivalence relation is the one induced by f. Equivalence classes are fibers. Same if I had a surjection of groups, and this is a group homomorphism, then really this was up to unique group isomorphism, the group G mod n with the quotient homomorphism, and this tangle commutes. Then we ask the same question in topological spaces. If I have a continuous surjection, then is this really this space? And that depends on whether Y has the quotient topology. Okay, so this is the quotient topology. That is why this is an embedding. Y has the quotient topology. Sorry, this is a quotient map of topological spaces. Then we talked of examples of quotients. No. Then we talked of embeddings and quotients inheriting various properties. So whether Hausdorffness is inherited was the first question by embeddings and by quotients. And here was the argument that Hausdorffness is necessarily inherited by embeddings or subspaces. And that argument was made using just the simple technology of products and categorical argument, though I also gave you an argument involving points and open sets. Then we came to whether Hausdorffness is inherited by quotients. And I gave you some examples in other categories of properties inherited by quotients. For example, cyclic group, then quotient group is also cyclic group. So now we are asking, so Hausdorff topological space, is the quotient topological space also Hausdorff? So quotient is by some equivalence relation, we took its graph, and then we found that, then I left to you this as an exercise, that then if x to x mod tilde is a quotient, then x cross x to x cross tilde cross x mod is also a quotient in topological spaces. And then the inverse image of the diagonal was exactly the graph. So we came to this conclusion that the quotient is Hausdorff and only if R is closed in x cross x. It did not involve the Hausdorffness of x. So we gave an example of an equivalence relation whose graph was not closed, and therefore that quotient is not going to be Hausdorff. And once again we summarize this, that given any topological space and any equivalence relation, the quotient is Hausdorff if and only the graph is closed. The simplest equivalence relation is equality. And if I take equality as my equivalence relation, the quotient is x itself, and then the graph is just the diagonal. And so this theorem just reduces to the earlier statement that the space is Hausdorff and only its diagonal is closed. And so that is the end of today's talk. And I end my lecture with this. And before we are thrown out by the next speaker, you have time for questions. So now the rules are relaxed and you can ask any question. Golo. Have you guys got addicted to countdown? कंप्यूटर जी आज का लेक्चर लॉक किया जाए. Review, you want any review? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. There have been no questions, so I'm going to stop sharing my Blackboard and I'm going to sign off. So see you guys at